Hello, everyone. Dr. Annalyn Schooley here, current president of FFTA, and I am thrilled today to have as our guest a longtime friend of mine, Dr. Larry Barlow. And Larry, you have been working on this topic of men in therapy for quite a long while, if I remember correctly. And does it go back even before the men's project in the prisons, the Father's Project?
No, no, I wouldn't say that. It's probably, yeah, back in around 1990, when we started the Fatherhood Project, and we got the governor's grant to do that for 3 years. And we didn't intend for it to be incarcerated settings, but that's actually the what we got.
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
we ended up over 10 years, Art Cleveland and I working with over 4,000 men.
That's
Uh,
amazing.
yeah,
So
yeah,
with that much experience, and then on top of that, I'm sure the literature review that you did to prepare for this, that I certainly don't think I can claim I've worked with 4,000 men. So that's amazing. So I'm sure that our listeners today will be very enlightened and get lots of great ideas. I know that for in the early days of family therapy, that engaging fathers was a big topic,
right. Yeah,
all the different
yeah.
ways to get, because we'd get mothers and kids to come in, children to come into
Hmm,
session,
hmm,
but
hmm.
it was so hard to get the father engaged. So
Right, right.
men in therapy has been an issue since the beginning of our field.
Hmm. Yes, true.
All right. All
Yeah,
right. So, uh, just as way of introduction, Dr. Barlow is a current faculty at Capella University and was faculty at Florida State University, executive director of the Family Therapy Association when it was a division of AMFT, and then I think you were executive of FFTA for a while,
yeah, yeah.
and then retired from all of that stuff.
Right.
And so we're very honored to have you come back and present for us.
Thank you, Dr. Schooley. It's an honor to be here. Yes, and it is a topic I'm interested in even learning more about, and it comes up occasionally in group supervision,
Mm.
working with the Capella MFT masters learners, and we have some interesting conversations about not just that, but many things, and so that's certainly one of them. Let me pull my PowerPoint up here, share it. We'll talk through that. Um, there will be times I'll stop sharing it because I've got some videos and other things that I want to share as part of that. Um, the title actually came as I was researching this for the Delta Kappa Spill the Tea, um, when I found an article by someone who has done quite a bit of research on this topic. It's Zach Sedler, um, and uh, School of Psychology, University of Sydney. And it was interesting to me. I actually found that there's been a lot of research and a lot of public policy programs about this topic in Australia, and some of them linked to the work that's been done in Canada, not so much in the United States. So I thought that was
That is
interesting.
interesting.
When I
Australia, but not the U.S. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, when I saw that in Australia, it made me think of the old movie, the Crocodile Dundee and the Macho
Yes.
Man and all
Yes.
that. And it's neat to see that. And I have found a few other things, but this research article itself was in the International Journal of Psychiatry and Medicine in 2020, volume 55-4. Um, and it's called Once Bitten, Twice Shy: Dissatisfaction with Previous Therapy and the implications for future help seeking among men.
Mm.
And so that's where I got the title. I thought that was an interesting title, and I'll talk more about that article in just a few minutes. Let me go to the next slide here. So as we think about this, we think about, well, what are the problems for men in therapy? And I'm sure that you're aware of that, being culturally informed, society informed, and you have a father and a brother, and I had four brothers. Two have died now, but had four brothers, and a World War II father who flew in a bomber. He was a pilot in World War II and grew up in Mississippi, and so very much a macho, thing. And me and my brothers, for the most part, followed along in that with hunting and fishing and playing sports, football, baseball, track, all that sort of thing. So, what about your experience with uh, the problems with men in therapy, or just the culture, being aware of the culture in the United States?
Yeah, I think that certainly, the dominant discourse is that men don't even have feelings.
Yeah,
Never
yeah.
mind talk about them. I can remember when my parents divorced and my father went through a hard patch after that, and he said he suddenly realized that all those feelings that he said he didn't have, he actually did.
Mm-hmm.
But it
Mm-hmm.
took this kind of stress for him to recognize
Mm-hmm.
that. And I do know that the dominant discourses for men to, be the ones that bring home the money, but not to take
Right,
care of the
right,
home.
right,
That fathering is the fun stuff, the
right.
roughhousing with kids, but not the
Yeah, yeah.
the the parts where the child is sobbing on a parent's shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the father thing to do. Now, certainly
Mm-hmm.
there are gigantic exceptions to that, but that's the dominant
Mm-hmm.
discourse, and that all the emotional work in the family is done by the wife, by the woman.
Right,
um,
right,
and of
right.
course, what's interesting is, for a long stretch there, most of my work was with gay male couples, and
Mm-hmm.
so that was
Mm-hmm.
a real challenge.
Mm-hmm.
That they were already challenging the dominant discourses of
Right,
of the
right.
gender roles in their household.
Mm-hmm.
And there were a lot of really confused men that weren't quite sure, um, how they were supposed to manage in
Exactly,
relationships.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as you know, one of my brothers, who died in Chicago last year, was also a gay male,
Mm.
and he loved Chicago because it was such an accepting place that he lived. In fact, the area he lived in around Wrigleyville was also known as Boys Town.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, very, he loved finding that area of that country and the attitudes, although I know
Mhm.
not
Mhm.
everybody there, but there was a big pocket of acceptance. And in fact,
Yes.
he was editor at one point of the largest uh, gay oriented newspaper in
Ah,
America.
oh my
Uh,
gosh.
yeah, yeah. But it shut down with all the other newspapers back
Right.
many years ago.
Right.
But
Yeah.
but yeah, and he and I actually talked quite a bit about the topic of growing up in Mississippi and the culture there, and
Mhm.
I know it was I did not know growing up until he was an adult that he was gay, uh, but uh, and it was hard, and I knew there was a lot of stress in his life,
Yeah.
and that did come out particularly with my dad, who he never actually came out to,
Wow.
never did. We talked about it quite a bit, and he would tell me, well, every time we go home for Christmas, all my brothers bring their wives and everybody's there, and I can't bring my partner. And I said, well, you can, but you can't just show up. You
Gotta
know?
do a little pre-work. Yeah.
Right, right,
Yeah.
right. So anyway,
Yeah.
um,
Well, and
but
based on what you've described, Larry, you and I have talked about this several times, is that given your background, it's surprising that you became the very accepting, open, culturally competent man that you became.
well, thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that somehow you beat the dominant discourse that
Mhm.
probably men that you grew up with, the boys you went to high school with, and
Right,
such,
right,
did
right.
not. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 that's true. There's a lot of truth to that. And I'm not sure exactly why that is. I think there was influence from both my parents about uh, not being macho and just mean and stuff. Uh, but I think it developed a lot more in my marriage, getting married young. I was 21, uh, and in the work of getting into being a counselor. I think that's where a lot of it I became aware and just as you talked about the work in therapy, working in groups, working with men. In fact, I tell this story. My first male client as a counselor um, was uh, was a court-ordered client. He and his wife, and he was so large that he had to duck to get in the door in the counseling room. Big, huge guy. He was a biker, and so he came in with all the gear and everything. And I inquired, well, why are y'all here? And it was because he was court ordered because of some domestic violence. And his wife was just this tiny little petite lady, uh, but involved in some of the culture that he was obviously interested in some of that. And uh, and I had no clue what to do with them. At that point, I had, I honestly, I wish I could go back now, but towards the end of the session, he said, "Well, what should we do, between now and next week?" And I said, "Well, you probably are going to get angry. Uh, what do you think's going to happen?" And we talked about it a little bit, and I came up with an idea, which I don't do this anymore, particularly. I learned how to help clients come up with their own ideas, but I said, well, if you get angry, you just go outside and do something to get out of the house, take the anger, walk away. And so he came back in the next week, and to my surprise, I said, well, tell me what happened. He said, well, I did get angry, and I got so angry, I stormed out the back door. In fact, the screen door, I ripped it off the hinges. And he said, and I went out back, and we had a tree that was about this big around, and I tore it down with my bare hands. He said, but I didn't hit my wife.
Trees can be replanted, back doors can be
Right,
fixed.
right.
My
And
goodness.
I said, wonderful, wonderful. Like so stupid, I had no clue. As I said, well, I wish I could go back, but that was my first male client experience,
Wow. Wow.
and
And knowing that you've been doing therapy a very long time, that
right.
the fact that that sticks with you,
That's
yeah,
yeah,
that
that
that was
stays in
very
my mind.
impactful, that
Very
experience.
impactful, yes, very
Wow.
impactful.
Wow.
And yeah, and today, in fact, I when I got to preparing for this workshop for Capella, um, I asked my interns, uh, tell me what percentage, count your percentage of client couples or individuals, and what percentage are actually men involved with it,
Mhm.
either an individual man or a man in a
Mhm.
relationship, family, or whatever. And a lot, it was a big range. It went from somebody that had like one on their whole caseload to one of my male interns, and he said actually 80%. And I think that has a lot to do with where he works in Clearwater and the type of agency they are, and works with a lot of teenage boys and men and stuff like that. But I counted mine because I really didn't have a clue exactly what the number would be. And it was like 90%. And so, and that is part of what's in my Psychology Today profile, work with me and stuff, but I didn't really comprehend that, that, yeah, there's a lot of males in my caseload. But, and I do still today, I get the typical man who comes in, even in a couple, and he's been forced or coerced in some way to be there, not court ordered or anything, but forced, coerced to be there, and is honestly very quiet. And one of the references for this book that I read, one of the books I read uh, by another author on the subject, he's written books on working with teenage boys and men, and he said he was at a gathering of professionals, and somebody brought up the question, what do you do with the male uh, teenage boys who aren't talkative? And the consensus was that basically we just let them be and kind of do what we can. And he was upset about that himself, and has since come up and written a book on engaging boys and stuff like that, and teenage boys and men. So, but for me, I do have the male who's very shut down and in a way not comfortable being there, to say the least. And frequently, I always try to balance out, as most of us do, try to balance out the interaction. And I always ask towards the end of the session for each of them. In the first session, this is something I do every time. So, how do you feel working with me? And the majority of the time, it's positive from both clients. And so, yeah, there are some things that we're going to talk about today about this topic of how do we engage men effectively in marriage and family therapy. Um, but but yeah, I mean, I still see that very
Well,
much.
what's interesting for me, one of the things I'll be listening for is when our field started, it was mostly men.
It
Almost
was,
all of our founders are men, and
yes,
so the all of our models are built on, quite frankly, white men's
that's right,
view of the world and the
that's
view
right.
of families. And nowadays, of course, our field is predominantly women,
Yes.
and certainly in our classes at Capella, and I'm sure that's
Mm-hmm.
true when you
Mm-hmm.
were at FSU and
Mm-hmm.
such, that
Mm-hmm.
the majority of the classes are women. And
Yes.
so so as we go through this, I hope people will think about how the ideas that we're going to talk about, how they look on a male therapist versus how they look on a female
Right.
therapist.
Right. Right. That happening, that occurrence, because yeah, when I first joined AAMFT, it was 87% white men who were members of AAMFT.
Wow.
Today, it's close to 60% women who are members of AAMFT, and our average member is the around 50-year-old uh, female therapist. Uh, but that's not an accident. This is kind of a side story. That is not an accident. Corporate America planned that and worked to gather that. Back in the late 1980s, if you remember when managed care came in, and they were doing town halls and gatherings and things in different areas. And I was a board member of FAMFT, the Florida MFT group. And uh, we asked one of our people on the board to attend the meeting and paid for them to go to Pensacola, I remember, or somewhere in the Panhandle, to the meeting. And when he came back, he told us the alarming statistics, and a lot of people laughed at it. He said, uh, the corporate America and the insurance companies are working to make this a female dominated profession, just like teaching and nursing. And it all has to do with reimbursement.
Pay less.
So
That's right.
it's not
Wow.
not just a happenstance that more and more women have been brought into it. It's been efforts to somehow turn men away, and part of that is the pay versus other healthcare
Mm-hmm.
professionals,
Mm-hmm.
that therapists make. Uh, so unfortunately, that's a
And I'm
political
assuming
thing.
that's across social work, mental health,
Yes, yes,
and marriage and family. But
I
I
find
don't
it is.
know if psychology is majority women or not. Um, but I'm sure that it's close. If not the same, it's
Right,
close.
right. I'm sure it is.
So,
Yeah, I'm
all right.
sure it is too.
Well, that's fascinating. So,
Yeah,
so there's all kinds of gender issues
right, right.
related to therapy, from how we engage clients to who are the therapists,
Mhm,
and even up to the gendered reimbursement levels.
mhm, mhm.
Yeah, fan, fascinating, fascinating.
So, what are the problems for men in therapy? The predominant uh, individual problems for men coming to therapy are depression and anxiety, just like they are with the majority of people, period.
Hmm.
And and frequently it's through going to their medical doctor, family physician, and then getting referred, for that. Uh, uh, but when they come, what we see from the research is commit suicide in women, still many of them do not reach out for help. But what we are seeing in this research is that the majority of those who do still come in very reluctantly and come in doubting what's gonna, is it gonna be helpful? They doubt about uh, fessing up to their real feelings and how dangerous they are. And some of the articles that I looked at were showing that um, even though men as a whole have been, at least in Australia, more likely to attend therapy, at least to reach out to it, they come for only a few sessions frequently completed. So they're less likely to. And that's true for men who commit suicide. I was going to show this video, but I won't show it to take up the time. It's one that a lot of people are familiar with. It's somebody who's dedicated his professional life to helping suicide. And one of our old colleagues, Doug Fleming, Dr. Fleming from Nova Southeastern, did research on the people who survived jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge. And what Kevin Hines tells in his story, he says he was one of less than 30 people at the time that he jumped off the bridge. Now, he's, as you see in the picture, Kevin's not a late teenager, young 20-year-old now. But a few years ago, when he jumped off, he said exactly, he went to the Golden Gate Bridge hoping that he wouldn't commit suicide, hoping that somebody would stop and ask him uh, what's wrong, what's going on, and try to persuade him to not do that. Now, there's more factors to it from what we know. We know Kevin has self-described that he's been diagnosed bipolar. He was somewhat psychotic, as a teenager. Plus, he had gotten into doing drugs due to all this stuff going on. So there was a lot of factors going on, but nobody did stop him, and he went and he grabbed, and he remembers jumping off, and for the few seconds that it takes to drop, 150 feet or whatever it is, he said immediately he said, I wish I hadn't done that.
Mm.
And that's universal for the people who don't effectively finish committing suicide. That people are grateful that the ones who do survive for whatever reason, when they didn't intend to not commit suicide, say, I didn't immediately. I knew that was an impulse. I shouldn't have done that. I wish I hadn't done that.
Mm.
And he said when he was pulled up by the boat that was fortunately close enough to pull him out of the bay, the people were just astounded and said, "You don't know how lucky you are," And he thought nobody really cared, but of course, being taken to the hospital, his adopted family coming, and and his dad saying, "Why didn't you tell us?" Blah blah blah, and he found out in truth a lot of people cared, and so that the problems for men can be very serious, and that's part of what I wanted to point out in this today. So here's what some of the studies show. This particular one, the one once bitten, twice shy that I referenced there, and the dissatisfaction this is from 2020. And this research, as I said, was done in Canada, 133 Canadian men. And they identified the antithesis of masculinity to seek mental health services when having suicidal thoughts, that yeah, it's not something that they think, oh my gosh, I really want to reach out and get help. And just what I said a few minutes ago, men typically in the 133 that they did this evidence-based research with, men attended fewer sessions and prematurely dropped out. Men reported the reasons for their dropping out is that they often encountered negative responses. In some way, responses were negative towards them, negative attitude. There was a lot of discomfort and even some hostility, from some of the therapists that the 133 referenced there. So certainly having attended and having a dissatisfied time is a big discouragement for them to try to go back. And so the ambivalence that was already there, the doubt, the difficulty engaging, for them to engage and so on, and to be engaged is even greater, because of this dissatisfaction that over half of them described this was true.
Now, did the study talk about what was going on with was this hostility from the therapist?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So did the study talk about is that inherent dominant discourses
Or the
about
agent E.
from therapists, assuming you're a man, man up, buck up, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, you shouldn't have this problem. Is it therapists' own inherent sexism part of that?
They didn't go into huge detail about it. It was, and they didn't talk to the therapist in this research, but it was the reports from the men that kind of like they were a problem client is one of the things that came
Okay.
up.
Okay.
And it wasn't what we would call in our MFT collaborative. It wasn't collaborative. They felt there was some blaming and distancing. Uh, uh, the clinical literature advocates a purposeful clarification of the therapy process at the onset that doesn't feel as comfortable to men. And I know from years ago when I did work in the fatherhood area, this is something I would go and as part of our work, we would go to school, particularly preschool, and present to staff and talk about, look around your preschool. And if you're looking at pictures of children, are most of the pictures children with women, with the moms? And how does the preschool staff welcome the dad being involved? And so there was a problem there many years ago. I don't know today, but back in the 1990s, that was certainly true. And I think there's somewhat that in what they're saying about the work with the therapy agencies, not just the therapists. It says overall, the current findings confirm that satisfaction with therapy plays an important role in shaping men's attitudes about the effectiveness of psychotherapy, stress to even their physician, much less to the counselor. So,
Wow. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, I could see how, a disgruntled man or a man that's sitting there with his arms folded or
Right.
not very cooperative um would might be hard for a therapist who doesn't know how to work with that,
Exactly.
or how
Exactly.
to understand that, you know he there are good reasons why he's not happy about being in therapy.
Right.
um
Right.
and
Right.
and so it's our job as therapists to work with that, not uh slap them for being a bad client.
Right.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. All right, that's really really interesting. I'm thinking of future dissertation topics to
Oh,
guide people
yes,
to.
very much. Very. So, as part of another article, which is about a particular program in Australia that I'm going to talk about later, they actually came up with a Likert scale of questions, 1 to 5, from one being, I don't feel competent in this, and 5 being, I feel highly competent in it. And so it asked therapists to rate each item. And I thought these were interesting questions for people to just be aware of. I know how to leverage a man's masculinity to help intervene when he is suicidal, you know. And another training that I had, Dr. Schooley, was uh, 3 or 4 years ago, uh, probably longer. There were 2 things that started happening with behavioral health that mixed over. One was the military seeking to have civilian therapists trained to work with their clients because men were coming back from war and the VAs could not handle everything. And so I took some training and was involved for a while with Army One Source in Florida. And if you remember at the conventions we had a couple of programs where we brought in some people from Army One Source, some mental health professionals. And I still remember one of the stories from that was by a hero who was deployed for 18 months to 2 years, I forget. And she wanted to really, she was so excited he was coming home and she wanted to welcome him back home. And she had the whole house painted and spruced up and everything. And she thought he's going to come in and he's going to be so happy about this and so excited. Instead, she reported what? He came in and said, "Wait, I'm coming home. This isn't home." You know, to the soldier who's been out and been deployed, living in a tent and all of that stuff, you know, and having to deal with all the stress and trauma and everything. Uh, and certainly military, and the other area was first responders, particularly firemen and law enforcement. But the firemen
Mm-hmm.
have a very active program. In fact, in Florida, it's called the Second Alarm Project,
Mm.
and it's still a funded, active program where they'll go in and train you. And I went to a training at the Fire College. It was held at the Fire College in Orlando. That was a 2-day program, and as part of that, they had a lot of the firemen come in and talk about their depression and suicidal thoughts, because the rates of suicide are with the general public. And it was a big learning experience for me. And they described that a lot of the atmosphere in the firehouse was very much like that of the law enforcement and the military, very macho and very, you can't let feelings other than anger and, you know, whatever, happiness and stuff, but you can't show vulnerabilities and so on. And so that's part of it. How do you leverage a man's masculinity to help intervene when he's suicidal, and do that in a way that it doesn't feel demeaning or challenging to him as a man?
I'm as I'm kind of scanning through these questions, and you know, even though I've been at it for a long time and certainly counseled lots of men, I'm not sure I could, like, the one about the hierarchy of masculinities. I have never heard of that concept.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and you know, so there are a number of things on here. So are there sources you're aware of that you maybe have in your reference list where people could read more about some of the things that are mentioned in these questions?
Yeah, definitely. And I'm going to get into shortly, get into some actual training programs you can do
Excellent.
virtually to help educate us. But this scale is one that is used by one of these programs, yeah, these Australian programs. I thought it was good.
Yes,
Um,
I think they're great questions. They're very thought provoking.
so how do we, just what you're getting at, how do we improve our self-efficacy about our practice with men? It was interesting to me, and I found an NIH study I'm going to talk about next, but part of that led me to uh, the APA, American Psychological Association. They actually have a guideline. Boys and men, uh, stated therapists need to strive to build and promote gender sensitive services. And I looked and I didn't find one of those for AA. It's been around for a few years now. Um, and I thought this was very good, actually. What do we need to understand about male culture regarding seeking help? What do we need to especially understand about the people of color? And I'm going to talk about some of that in a minute. Improving cultural understanding about the awful history by the medical community, which we're part of the medical community towards African American people of color and other people of color. What negative experiences do men report? What does that lead, and how does that lead to just what we talked about earlier, higher dropout, increased service, mistrust? And if we say there is a critical window of opportunity, then what do we mean? And to me, I haven't studied the APA work enough yet, to be honest, to understand exactly. But to me, the critical window of opportunity is probably the first session, you know, because as you know from the common factors research that we all know what the therapeutic alliance is about 40% of getting a positive outcome. And that starts right away. I love Sue Johnson and her attitudes and the EFT work. And Sue Johnson says uh, change happens in the moment. It doesn't, it's not that people are going to change when they leave the room. It happens in the therapy room. And if we engage people and collaborate with them, which we'll talk about later, then change can happen. And one of the stories, one of my other stories about a male client that I tell is I had a wife come in, a young wife. She'd been married about 6 or 9 months. Let me get a drink here. And this was a second marriage for her, as it was for her husband. She and her husband had met on a dating app years ago. They had met. They lived about 200 miles apart. And so she came into me very distraught because 2 weeks into the marriage, they were still living and working apart, but she was with him in Florida. And uh, uh, they had this big fight, big conflict, and she drove home in the middle of a hurricane coming ashore near her, but fortunately made it home. But since that time, uh, there had been no communication. She would try to reach out to him. He would not take the call. He wouldn't respond to a text message or anything to try to get him to join, and give him my contact number. I made a decision that, well, would you like me to try to reach him? And I do that very sparingly, but occasionally I have done that with men and women. And just my general approach is, hey, this is Larry Barlow, a marriage family therapist. This person has come to see me, and I really feel like I need your help. What I'm just asking you, would you come in at least one time and just talk to me so I could get your perspective on the problems? And even if you don't come back, that'll help me in helping your partner here. And so I did. I reached out to this gentleman, and I didn't know at the time, but he's a very successful businessman in his 40s, millionaire, um, and very competitive, go-getter, And the reason I know he's a millionaire because he told me the first session that he could retire anytime he wanted to. And I said, great. Uh, and so, but when I called him, he stopped me in the middle of my request and he said, this is the most unprofessional thing I can ever imagine anybody doing, and just very belligerently attacked me and belittled me for doing what I did. But I stayed the course and just stubbornly said, okay, and blah, blah, blah. And I just would love to get your input in person. And he had to drive about 200 miles to come to the office from where he
Wow.
lived to where my office is. But he came. He did come. And I met with him individually. And actually, after meeting, he wanted to do joint sessions with her. And so we did engage in that. And he became one of the most excited clients. He would call me, and he still lives hundreds of miles away. He would call me and say, hey, I'm coming to Tallahassee. I'm going to go to the FSU baseball game or whatever. Have you got any time that we can meet? You know, and so it's interesting to me that somehow there was that critical window of opportunity. And I'm not saying I did a great job, but somehow we engaged him in that critical time. And I'm sure you've seen that with clients that you've worked with too in other ways. So NIH study. So this is the study here about at the National Institute of Mental Health. I've been to Bethesda for a workshop one time and was super impressed. And but they had a research that was done back a few years ago, a couple of years ago, and the research was about men and mental health and engaging them. And part of on the left here, what we see are some of the symptoms from men who came to therapy. And as we look at those, I mean, we see many of those same things with women, right? Too, but these are the symptoms for what in their study that people came in for therapy seeking. And what they did is they identified federal resources. And we see on the right side here programs, various programs reaching out to do work with men, particularly. The one on the bottom, Why We Need to Talk About Men's Mental Health, is a blog post the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services has, which is, they have some wonderful, wonderful blog posting on all kinds of subjects. I've used many of those before with directing clients to them. This particular one I wanted to share. Let's see if I can pull it up here. I'm probably going to have to stop sharing to do this, but let's see. No, I didn't even show that one. Not the one I'm going to show. Let me stop sharing and pull this up so I can get to it easily. Here we go. So there are two links here to show.
And I don't yet see them.
You can't see them. Okay. Let me go back to Zoom and bring this up.
There we go.
So, Brother, You're on My Mind. And honestly, until I started researching for this presentation, I had never heard of this, and I was real excited about seeing it. Brother, You're on My Mind, Changing the National Dialogue Regarding Mental Health Among African American Men. And this is a program that's collaborated with the Omega Psi Phi fraternity. So among that group of trying to just reach out and help men who are having trouble with some mental health issue, depression, of course, is the most common, but there are others also, and especially suicide is one of the things they're trying to avoid. And their two goals were to collaborate on efforts to educate Omega members, their families, and related communities on the effectiveness of depression and stress. And the goal number two, to communicate the importance of seeking help for mental health problems and to encourage affected individuals to get information, possibly by talking with their healthcare providers in order to obtain appropriate treatment, so to get referrals through their healthcare professionals. And so I thought this was an outstanding program, and there's actually a little bit more about it. Let me see if I can get to that. I'll stop sharing again for just a second. Let me share this. Oops. Sorry. Here we go. There we go. Sorry for that. So this is the website about the program at NIH, National Institute of Minority Health and Health Disparities. And it actually provides a toolkit. The Brother You're on My Mind toolkit provides the fraternity chapters and partners with the materials needed to educate fellow fraternity brothers and community members on depression and stress in African American men. And so as you see there, the toolkit, the community partnerships, the event planning, some really great things that came out of this program that was helped to be developed by a grant with NIH. So it's, when I saw that, I kind of, and we have a outstanding historically Black university here in Tallahassee, Florida A&M University. But I've never heard if they are doing this program. I plan to reach out and ask and see and find out, because I am very familiar with some of the community that I know and how involved the adults stay with their fraternity. And that is something that is very special to the Black community, I think, African American community.
Yeah, I'm particularly interested in those handouts about managing stress, practicing the ask, and true and false. I'm particularly interested in taking a look at that. I'm not sure that as a individual practitioner, I'm ready to do an event planning, but certainly the education materials, the fact sheets at the top, might be things that you would direct clients to, or that we as practitioners would read to just familiarize ourselves with what this program has already put together.
Exactly. And there's a video here. I won't play it now, but if you go to this website, then you can find it there with NIH. Brother You're on My Mind toolkit. So U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, NIH, Institute of Health. So let me go back to the PowerPoint here. Oops, did that, but I didn't share it. So, and as you see, there are others there too, since it's recorded. People will see these and they can look up those resources and see what's there. But I think those are all very good. And so at this point, I was going to ask people, what does work for you, to think about that. And if we were doing a large group of people, we could break into small groups, do some discussion rooms. We won't tonight because of the time factor, but that would be something that we could do. The core principles in the videos that I found on NIMH were, the things that we talk about, foundational skills. So express empathy, develop discrepancy, roll with resistance. So if you have somebody like the client that I called, just roll with that. Don't, realize it does express ambivalence, and don't let that turn you away from it.
Now, what do you mean by develop discrepancy?
That's a good question. What that means to me is to help the client identify, particularly with men, help them identify what they want in life, what their goal is, and what they're actually experiencing at this point in time.
Mm, mm.
How is
So,
how
I mean, we as supervisors, we harp on what's the goal? You got to work
right,
on finding out the client's goals. And I think what you might be saying, and this makes sense to me, is that it's even more important for men to have a clear goal. Men are socialized to be very goal directed and very
right,
content
right,
and outcome oriented. And so,
exactly,
having a clear goal and talking about what that's going to look like. So, if they want
right,
to have better
right,
communication with their wife, or
yep,
more sex in their life, or whatever,
exactly,
um,
right.
a vague goal probably is not going to cut it.
No, no,
That men
no.
need to know what exactly are we talking about here.
Hmm.
Um, this is true for everyone.
Right.
But it sounds like until the men are very well engaged, that they really
Hmm.
see some change, it's going to have to be pretty concrete. Um,
I
and
agree. I agree.
and I mean, I tend to work more in the metaphoric, abstract meaning world.
Hmm.
But that, at least initially, may not make it for men. That
Hmm.
they need to be able to measure that something is changing, in a way that's meaningful to
Right.
them.
Well, but your favorite model that you and I've talked about is a problem-solving model.
Yes, MRI. Yes,
Yes.
yes,
Yeah.
indeed.
And
I
and I
still,
think
even though
that
from
is
an
what
MRI
a
perspective, though, I like to look at the semantics of the cycle.
mhm.
What was the meaning of all of that? Um, and I know that Susan Johnson is widely read and used. Um, and yet I bet it's hard to get men engaged in all that emotional work.
Right. Right.
And
Yeah.
so that whole attunement phase of of validating and empathizing and summarizing and making sure that
Hmm.
you clearly are using their language and they don't feel
Exactly.
pathologized, and all of
Yep.
that
Yep. Yep.
much more has to be there before when men will take the risk to do the emotional stuff.
Yeah. In fact, I one of my favorite videos to show, particularly when I'm starting with a new cohort in therapy in internship, is a Sue Johnson video in the Capella Library. And it only shows a few clips for maybe 10 minutes of her working with a couple. But in her enthusiastic way and her not knowing perspective that she so well takes, and you see her working with this couple who's married, and he is a retired military. He was a helicopter pilot, and she's trying to get at their conflict, very high level conflict that the two of them are having, and she's leaning in and she's talking to it, and she said, "So this is kind of what I hear, but that's my language. I don't know what your language is." And he comes up with a overall language that he learned as a helicopter pilot of clicking into, and I can't remember the exact word, but it's clicking into this automatic focused thing, and everything else in the world disappears, and it's land the damn helicopter. you know, no matter if people are firing bullets at you, no matter what's going on and all the crisis, it's land the damn helicopter. And she does so well at validating that, yes, that's what's going on with you. And in that moment, you're flooded and you can't really, you're getting into conflict with your wife, and you jump into the land the damn helicopter, and she doesn't understand where you're coming from. But does that mean that you don't love her, that you don't want to reach out? He says, no, and then he enthusiastically gets into, and she helps, of course, with that. But it's just what you're saying there of helping goal set and helping them to find what's important. And I think that we can do that in the first session. I think we can bring about those kind of changes. And typically by the end of the session, the first session, I've tried to identify, well, what are your goals here through the work and assessing and all of that? What are the goals that they're after that as we've talked through it, I've identified this goal and that goal, and I'll bring it back up and summarize it. And then I'll clearly say, yes, that's something I think that I have experience with and that I can help you with. And I think that's important. That's important, particularly for getting that kind of commitment from them. And that's not true about every single thing when people walk through the door. There's some things that I say, no, I rarely treat substance abuse for a lot of reasons I won't go into, but I know people who are excellent at it, and I can refer them. And and if they want to come back for something else, then maybe we can find something else to work on. But if they're working with me to overcome their addiction, then I'm not the best person, because for one thing, they lie to me too easily. That's what I tell my
Right,
students.
right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And it's funny how um young new therapists, not necessarily young in age, but young in the field, um they come in, most of us come in thinking we'll happily see any client. And
right,
it's as we it, you know inevitably we find things that we enjoy more than other things, or that we're better at other things.
right,
And so
right,
we become more specialized, not and then we have to go read some more and go to workshops and learn more about that. But all of us graduate with our masters in marriage and family being generalists.
right,
And
right,
and of
right.
course, one of the important things about being able to know how to work with men is, no matter what your specialty is, you're going to come across men. um so I think this is one of the core competences that we need to have, is being able to
Exactly.
manage the different genders. And I still
Right.
want to know about those hierarchy of masculinities. That's something
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
really now super curious about that. Um,
Well, one of the articles I found is called Pragmatic Applications for Therapeutic Engagement with Marginalized Men,
mm,
an intersectional exploration of two emerging adult African American male clients. And there was a term in there that you talk about not knowing, develop discrepancy term. There was a term in there I'd never heard, but when I brought it up the other day when I was talking with the Delta Kappa people at Spill the Tea, a few of them had heard this. It's called Cool Pose, COOLPOSE. You ever heard that?
cool. What's the second word?
Pose, POSE.
Oh, cool pose.
Evidently,
No, I guess I don't know what that is.
it's an African American boys and men social, gender, cultural process that they've been influenced as masculine performity. And here's what the definition of it: cool pose can be understood as the elevated manifestation of various masculine norms. For example, toughness and emotional control. I thought about that, and I remember so much in the parenting classes of, parents telling little boys, big boys don't cry, and I think my parents said that, big boys don't cry when you run in and you scuffed your knee or something. So toughness, emotional control in response to ongoing external threats, including oppressive white power structures, systemic racism, and other neighborhood hazards. So that's cool pose. And that is very much a racial issue of the distrust in the medical community. And so, yeah, we have to realize if we're working with people of color, particularly men of color, that they've been taught that we don't know they're taught, you know. You remember the workshops that we had years ago with Ken Hardy, Dr. Ken Hardy coming and talking about culture and understanding the culture with marginalized clients, and him bringing up things that, you know, that are taught in the Black community to children, such as the idea of, well, you're going to be stopped for driving a car, Black driving a car, and women's hair was one of them, and so there are a number of those kind of things that is part of our learning that we may not know, and we may be able to help our client help explain some of those things to us, that taking that collaborative, not knowing perspective.
But yeah, I can see how this concept of cool pose is this is a survival uh
Right,
thing, and
very
I
much.
think for white men or men of all men, that they too have these dominant discourses that that they have to live up to, because that's what society says you're supposed to do, and also this is the way they manage, because they haven't learned how to manage other stuff. They, like my
Right.
dad, who says, I just don't have those same feelings. I don't have the breadth of
Hmm.
feelings that you and your mother have. Like, well,
Right. Right.
you know, and then he learned other under duress. And then I'm guessing men feel kind of crazy when they have those feelings and they don't know what to do
Right.
with them.
Right. And typically, we're very good as men of compartmentalizing. You
Hmm.
know, I'll just shut that drawer and put it away and compartmentalize, and I won't think about that, you know, anymore unless I'm in that particular emergency or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
It is a
Mm-hmm.
survival coping mechanism. It's very much that. So the program, let me go in a little bit about this. The program that I found in Australia was a program called Men in Mind, and it's a world first online professional training programs for therapists, men and women, male and female therapists. It aims to increase therapist skills and confidence to engage, connect with, and respond more effectively to male clients. So let me stop sharing this and just show you their website a little bit here. I'm going to show you two things here. Share. So this is their website, helping therapists support men, and it's called Men in Mind, and you need to put in this word that you see on the screen there, Movember, Men in Mind, Movember, and if you Google it, it'll come up as you see in the address there,
And
meninmind.movember.com.
that's like the month of November, but with an M instead of an
It
N.
is, yeah. And they've got this little introductory video here. Again, I'm not going to show that right now, but the research about it, and this is the person I told you about, Dr. Zach Sidler, who did the other article on Once Bitten. He was one of the many people who contributed to that. He's director of the mental health training for Movember, research fellow in Australia. And so here they explain a little bit about what does mental health, men's help seeking for mental health look like, the findings, some of their publications, engaging men in depression. And you see all of these are fairly recent, 2016, 2018. The role of masculinity in men's helping seeking for depression, engaging men in psychological treatment, scoping review, men's masculinity, why it's time to focus on masculinity, 2019. And so a lot of publications, living the once bitten, twice shy, dissatisfaction, and then getting men through the door that came a little later, 2020, and what gets in the way. So let me stop sharing that, and I'll show you some of the actual content that I thought was very interesting. Hopefully you can see this well enough. I can enlarge it a little bit maybe here. Come on. Here we go. Okay. So these are some of the modules that they teach. There are 4 modules to this training, and I've actually signed up for it, although I haven't heard back from them. I think they said it would be a few months before they do another module training. And so you see some of the myth busting, like men just aren't as emotional. And I say this a lot to people. You know, men have as many emotions, but frequently when we communicate in what I call code, which means that it's not feeling words necessarily. How are you doing? I'm fine. You know, it doesn't really communicate a lot of emotion to us. But what does that really mean? And so you have to help break down the code that men have. And so that's part of it. And part of it is what they say. How can we help? By offering our male clients a better vocabulary. So part of it is some psychoeducation. And there's some key psychological exercises that they teach you. So instead of asking, how did that make you feel? Which I know you hate that when our students do that. We prompt a better emotional experience by saying or validating that must really hurt. So we're modeling a better word for them, kind of thing. But as you see here, this is just part of what I did find about it, the what, why, when, how. And again, the how gets at some of the things that they do get at in their training that I look forward to, and some of the PDFs and things like that. And so the scale that I mentioned, the EMITS, is there. There's just a lot of stuff there. So, so that's very helpful. Let me go back and share the PowerPoint now. Okay.
So this is not a training that's ongoing. So you sign up and then you wait to see when they're
but it's
okay.
not all the time. Yeah.
Okay. It's
So they are
not
evidently
regular.
waiting
Okay.
to gather groups to do it, you know, I think is what I understood there. But it's a really good program, Men in Mind program. Remember the Movember, M instead of an M instead of an N there. But the acronym, gender competency acronym, as part of one of their modules is manage expectations, agree on a path, leave with a lesson, empower him with change. These are all the things you and I have discussed in the last hour and a half.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was
not the leave with a lesson. That one we have not talked about. So that's interesting. But we did talk about the concreteness. Yes.
right.
Yes,
right.
the concreteness. Yeah.
Well,
And
it's kind of
empower
like,
him with change.
yeah. That's the discrepancy, you know, that yes, you're here, you're not happy with this being here, this is what you want. And that gets at a very solution oriented type of approach, I think, of trying to help the client imagine the solution. It's kind of that miracle question, that in Sue
Yes.
Kimber breaks down so well, that if we can get them to, we know from neurological research that if people can begin to imagine it, then it actually makes changes in the brain and it helps them move towards making those changes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And to leave with the lesson is that, men do like something concrete. One of the couples I work with virtually, they live in Central Florida, and they're both professionals. They're actually do happen to be a African American couple. Been married a while, and they love homework. so I'm giving them some apps, and then we talk about what they did on the apps, or I'm giving them some readings like Hold Me Tight book by Sue Johnson. I'll probably end up with some Esther Perel thing, and it's the Gottman app, the card deck, and so on. And then asking them about it is part of it, part of it also. So what are some takeaways, Dr. Schooley, that you have from today? What are a couple of takeaways or so?
Well, I love the resources. I definitely want to go check out more about Men in Mind. And though the managing expectations and agreeing on a path, that those two things came easily to me,
Yeah,
being more purposeful about
yeah,
leaving
yeah,
with a lesson. That is, I mean, one of the things that I supervise my folks to do is to not give advice, and so leaving with a lesson that's not
right,
advice
right,
giving, or
hmm,
creating a homework that is not me imposing on it. I think that
right,
is
right,
is um
right,
is some of the trickier things
hmm,
for new
hmm,
people to do, and tricky for me too, because it's so much easier to just tell people what to do. But
right,
if that
right,
if that
right.
worked, I could do that all the time. It never works. So
No,
so
no,
that's where
it's
I
not
have
us
to
telling them,
be
it's
so
not
much
about,
better about uh being collaborative. There's that
right,
collaborative
right,
language, being able to get multiple perspectives, and then
hmm,
it's okay if we do it slowly,
yes,
but we
yes,
have to
yes,
be efficient because we've only got that window
hmm,
of opportunity. That's another
right,
takeaway
right,
for me of I need to go slow, but I have to
hmm,
be brief.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
so that we get somewhere in that first session, because that's how to get buy-in,
Hmm.
from
Right.
men. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, and I'll give an example today with working with a couple that I saw today, and I've been working with them a few months now. They come in about once a month, and they're a wonderful couple, uh, 5 children, I believe 4 or 5 children, and one in college and stuff. And they really are a wonderful couple to work with, and it's an honor to work with them. Uh, but one of the things from just today's session was very much of a very solution focused thing of small change, just a small change is enough. They were talking about some efforts they were making to be more affectionate and to have better interaction with the conflict work that we've worked on through the months. Uh, but the small change of, yeah, just the being aware of saying, giving a compliment. And John and Julie Gottman actually talk about this in one of their podcasts. And I love their terminology, small change often. And that's where I left it with them today, was taking what they had talked about, the efforts they were making, the problems that, there were failures, there were dissatisfaction with some of it, but in just encouraging them that, yeah, this is what you're wanting, this is your goal, and small things often help us move towards that.
Yeah, the journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step. So,
right.
but we are a part of what we're socialized to do nowadays is fast food, everything, fast,
Right, right,
fast
right.
everything, and same day delivery, same hour delivery, and
Mhm.
so yeah, the challenge of that.
Right.
So yeah, this is painful,
Yeah,
Robin.
this is painful. This is somebody that I loved as a professional comedian and actor. Um, and I know that he certainly had many mental health issues and did die from suicide, unfortunately. But there was a video, and again, I'm not going to show it here tonight, but I encourage you to go to YouTube. It's called "We See It Too Late," and it's actually a video he did uh, on the fragile meaning of life. But as
Mm,
we listen to it, it's actually very inspirational to listen to it. But again, the reason I put this here is it ties back into a lot of the research on this topic of we don't want to see it too late. We don't want to miss those critical windows. And so we do want to work to bring down that 5.7 times more likely for men to suicide, to die by suicide. And just being aware, a few months ago, I had a couple, and the guy was had been a firefighter for years and years. And in one of the individual sessions, I had some individual in some joint. I asked him point blank, do you think about suicide? And we had a discussion about it. And fortunately, he didn't, or at least he said he didn't. And we talked about his faith and various things like that. But don't be afraid to ask that one more question. That's that's part of the, Carl Whitaker's advice, and also from Dr. Ken Hardy. Ask that one more question.
mm,
So,
thank you.
thank you. It's been an honor to share tonight.
And it's it's a topic that I think as clinicians we often take too much for granted, and so it's good to have talked about that, to increase awareness. And so thank you very much, Dr. Barlow. Um, uh, I appreciate the resources along the way, particularly the website
Yeah,
on Men in Mind that had a list of those articles that
right,
that people can go find if they want to learn more.
right.
But for those who are still in supervision, bring this up in your supervision. Talk
Mm-hmm.
about, think about how are you engaging men, and are you? Are you seeing kids but don't include the father? Are you
Mm-hmm.
seeing the wife but not the husband? And think about what's going on in your work that you're not engaging the men. I think
Right,
that's an important thing to be thinking about. All right.
definitely.
Well, so if you will give me back, or you can stop the recording.
Okay.
And thank you everyone for listening.
You're quite welcome.